Hello guys, Bobgar here, and it is $10 deck time. This week in $10 deck, we're headed back to Modern, and we're going to look at some Modern Mono Green Elves. Probably one of the most competitive decks I've actually done on $10 deck, and so we're going to jump in and start looking at the cards. We're going to start out at the bottom. Just a few mana dorks that are pretty much all functionally equivalent. Arbor Elf has one disadvantage in our deck. We're not running any land pumps, so he doesn't add any more mana than Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elves here, and the one disadvantage is he can be hit by certain cards, like I think Pithing Needle will hit him and won't hit normal elves because that only stops non-mana abilities, so it can't stop Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, or some of our other cards, but it can stop untapping a forest because untapping a forest is not technically a mana ability. But basically all of these three cards are functionally equivalent in our deck. We want to ramp early and we want lots of elf bodies out on the battlefield. Then the big ramp. So these are cards that ramp us for more than just one. Heritage Druid is probably the most key piece to the deck. It's also over 50% of the cost of the deck on Magic Online. I think $6 for the playset about. And it basically turns all of our elves into Llanowar Elves, into these mana dorks. You need 3 of them untapped at a time, so that can be an issue. You can end up in a state where you just have 2. But if you ever have 3 elves untapped at a time, you can tap all 3 of them to produce 3 green mana. And we only use green mana, so that's all we need. It's also important to note that this is not a tap ability on the elves itself, not even on Heritage Druid. So you can do this to the elves the turn they come into play. Even if they're summoning sick, they can still tap as part of these 3 elves to produce the mana for us. So this will be very important later on when we're trying to combo off. You can tap them for Heritage Druid even when they are summoning sick. And then the other big ramp is Elvish Archdruid. It's a 2/2 for 3. Not only does it count as a lord for our elves, making all of our elves +1/+1 larger, it also has tap, add a green mana to your mana pool for each elf you control. And we are going to control a lot of elves. Turn 3, this thing will probably tap for about 4 or 5 mana, and then later on it could tap for 10 or 20. So this guy is a huge ramp piece. And especially if we don't hit Heritage Druid, we will lean on him heavily to help us ramp out our creatures and our card draw. And so then after that, we're going to look at some ways we keep the elves coming in. I think it's about almost half our deck in those mana dorks. And they don't do that much on their own. Yeah, we have a Lloyd in there, but other than that, they're just a whole slew of mana. Well, what do we do with all that mana? Well, if we just played out all those and we didn't have anything else, we would probably lose the game. We run 2 cards that help us draw more cards. So Lead the Stampede, you look at the top 5 cards of your library and you can put any number of creature cards from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So for us, on average, this will grab 3 creatures, I believe. I think we're exactly 60% creatures. I guess we're 66.666% creatures because we're 40 creatures, I believe. So anyway, it'll grab on average slightly over 3 of the 5 cards will be creatures, so probably like 3.2 or so. So we'll usually grab about 3 creatures off of this. So it's a 3 mana draw 3. Occasionally it'll be a 3 mana draw 4. Slightly less commonly it'll be a 3 mana draw 2, but it'll always be really good. I don't think I've ever whiffed off it. There might have been a time I've only drawn one card off it before, but it mostly is going to do what we want it to do, draw us a lot of cheap elves to play down. Sylvan Messenger is a little clunkier just because it's 4 mana, but it has some advantages too. 1, it counts as an elf creature, which can be a big deal, and 2, it basically has the same effect as Lead the Stampede. It only works on elf creatures, but all of our creatures are elf creatures, so for us it is equally good. The only disadvantage is it only looks 4 deep and it costs 1 more mana. But it gives us the elf body, which, as you'll see in a little bit when we're comboing off, a lot of times is actually more valuable. And then the value elves. So these are just elves that aren't necessarily... They don't win us the game, they just generate us value in various ways. So Elvish Visionary comes down, and the turn it comes down, it draws us a card. It's great. Hopefully it'll draw us, an elf or a land or a Lead the Stampede. Those are really the only 3 options, and all of those are good for our deck. I mean, there's some chance we'll get flooded, but we run so few lands that that's very rare. Dwynen's Elite comes down, and as long as you have one other elf in play when you play it, which we always will, it produces a 2nd elf creature token. So as long as you have a Heritage Druid in play, you can think of this as being mana neutral. It costs 2 mana to play it, but then produces 2 bodies that you can also tap to Heritage Druid to help with 2 of the mana that you would get off Heritage Druid. And then Lys Alana Huntmaster is whopping 4 mana. It's what makes our deck a little bit clunky, but it's super important to our deck because it gives basically every elf creature we cast the same ability as Dwynen's Elite. When you play it, you get a 1/1 elf token, and that allows us to go mana positive on a lot of the elves that we play, as long as we have Huntmaster out as well as Heritage Druid. So we only run 3 of it just because it's a little expensive and clunky, but if we can get it online, it's a really big combo piece because Dwynen's Elite becomes mana positive, all of our 1-mana dorks become mana positive, and I say mana positive because what it means is you play Dwynen's Elite for 2 mana, and if you have a Heritage Druid in play, you get the 2 bodies that you normally get from Dwynen's Elite, then you get an additional body from Lys Alana Huntmaster, and you can tap all 3 of those to get 3 mana. So you just paid in 2 mana to generate 3 mana. Likewise with the 1-mana dorks, you're paying 1 mana to generate a theoretical 2 mana, as long as you can get to 3 total elves to tap. So it makes all of those mana positive as we're trying to combo off. And then after the value cards is the payoff cards. These are pretty important too. Mostly Ezuri. Ezuri Renegade Leader is a 3-mana Lord. It doesn't have the +1/+1 ability, but it has things that are actually more important to our deck. It gives us a generate another elf for 1 mana. This helps keep us in the game a lot against things like sweepers. And it also has pay 5 mana. Elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. This helps us push through damage. It's super good in turn 4 or 5 when we just have a horde of elves and we can probably tap for 10 mana. Just pump all of our elves to +6/+6 and trample, swing in with 5 to 10 of them, and we'll probably win the game. So he's our best finisher when we can get him. We only run 2 because he's a legendary and he doesn't feel good to have more than 1 in hand. I could have gone up to 3. There's some question in my mind of whether to run 3 Ezuri or 3 Imperious Perfect. I went this split just because Imperious Perfect is not legendary, but Imperious Perfect is also considerably weaker. It's basically a 3-mana elf lord, and it has a pay 1 green and tap it to put in a 1/1 green elf warrior token into play, which is not super good in our deck, but if it gets grindy and if we don't have some of our combos, this can help us go wide. It can create chump blockers for lots of turns, and in certain matchups it's actually really, really good. But in general, it doesn't have the power of the Ezuri or the Elvish Archdruid, our other 2 lords. But we still run 3 of it. It's still pretty good in our deck. And then lands, we're running 16 basic forest. That's it. Just 16. We run so many mana dorks that we're functionally running, as long as we get a single forest, we're functionally running like 32 lands, I think, because we're running 16 mana dorks if you count Heritage Druid, because we're running Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Arbor Elf as well. Yeah, it makes our mana base super cheap and super consistent. I mean, it doesn't feel good. There's some more expensive lands we could run, but for this deck, it's pretty good. Then I wanted to show you a little bit about what our ideal turn structure looks like. So ideally, we play land turn 1, and then we play one of these 3 mana dorks. It really doesn't matter which one. We play one of them. So that will generate us 3 mana on turn 2, because we'll play a second land. We'll have the mana dork in play in the first land, so we can generate 3 mana. Then we do something like, with that 3 mana, we play Dwynen's Elite and Heritage Druid. With that, we'll have 3 more mana, because we can tap Heritage Druid, Dwynen's Elite, and the token he created to generate 3 more mana, and then we play something else. It could be a Lord, it could be another mana dork, and maybe another Dwynen's Elite. If we can do that, in fact, we can even combo farther and tap those 3 for more mana and play something else. But basically, this way we generate 3 mana to play them, and then 3 more mana. So we've generated 6 total mana, but we had to spread it around a little awkwardly. But this will generate us a whole bunch of mana by turn 2. And then on turn 3, hopefully we can go off. The ideal thing to do is play a Lys Alana Huntmaster before we play anything else. And then with the Lys Alana Huntmaster, all the cards we can play, hopefully we have some 1-drops or something like that, will produce extra mana. We'll produce a bunch of extra mana, and we'll dump that into Sylvan Messengers and Lead the Stampede to draw more cards. Like I showed you, a lot of our 1- and 2-drop elves are actually mana positive, or at very least mana neutral, with a single Lys Alana Huntmaster on the field. And a lot of times we can just burn through basically our whole hand on turn 3, and we usually won't be able to kill our opponent, but it'll set us up really well for a turn 4 lethal swing, especially if we can get Ezuri. But even if we can't, a lot of times we'll just have 16 elves on the field and 1 or 2 lords, and they won't be able to deal with a giant mass of 3/3s and 4/4s, and we'll just be able to swing for lethal anyway. Then I wanted to show you an example goldfish. This was the first one I did after, basically before filming this. I was like, well, I want to show an example. Let me do one goldfish and see what happens. This was a pretty lucky one. I don't think this is the average goldfish of the deck. This is probably a 20% of the time kind of thing. But I happened to goldfish, I happened to get a good hand, and this was the result. This is turn 4, and I swung for 235 damage. I swung for more than that. I swung for 255 damage because I started at 20. And as you can see, I went off. I had only a single Lead the Stampede, but I did have both Heritage Druid and an Elvish Archdruid, and I managed to play them both out by turn 3, and then play Lys Alana, tap Heritage Druid for I think like 8 or 10 or somewhere in there, and then dump basically the Lead the Stampede and everything I drew off it, and then turn 4 I tapped I think one of my 2 Archdruids, or maybe I tapped both of my Archdruids. I think I tapped both of my Archdruids, generated somewhere around 20 mana, and just pumped it all into Ezuri, who I happened to have down too, and with that, all my elf creatures were 20/20 tramples, and yeah, super big blowout. Usually I don't get the number quite that high on turn 4, but even if you're swinging for 50, it's usually enough. So this is kind of an example of like your ideal draw, what you want to have happen. This doesn't usually happen in practice because your opponent will have a kill spell for the Heritage Druid, or they'll have Thought Seized you turn 1 and taken your Elvish Archdruid, or they'll disrupt you somehow. But if they don't disrupt you at all, this deck can often just win turn 4, and often win turn 4 really, really big, like this. And then onward, I want to talk a little bit about matchups. I didn't make a matchup slide. What I really wanted to make a slide about is, what do we lose to? And yeah, single target removal can be hard for us if they're hitting the right pieces and we don't draw enough of the right pieces. Yeah, counter spells can be annoying. Cryptic Command can tap down our guys, that's annoying, or bounce them, something, but not the end of the world. The thing that beats our deck are board wipes. And the board wipes that I think are the most common and scariest to me, I just listed here. I don't think Pyroclasm gets that much play anymore. There's still some red-green Tron running around, but a lot of the Tron decks have switched to white-green or black-green, and yeah, don't even bother running the wipes. But yeah, Anger of the Gods, there's a lot of decks that still run. I think Ponza runs it, and then Skred did really well recently, so some people are still playing Skred, which runs it, I think, mainboard. And a lot of things run it in the sideboard too, especially decks that don't super need a lot of creatures, like I think Red Blue Storm runs it occasionally. Supreme Verdict is a mainstay in any white-blue control deck. Sometimes Jeskai Control will run a couple copies too. Mostly white-blue though, just because the color requirements are a little strict. And then pretty much any Tron deck is going to run Yujin. They very well might run Oblivion Stone as well. So both of those really just beat our deck, sweep us. I think Tron is a pretty hard matchup. So yeah, those are the 3 matchups that I look at and I go, I don't know if our deck can beat it. We're pretty reliant on keeping our elves on the board, and any mass wipe is going to get us in a lot of trouble. Alright, what else did I want to say? Oh, the sideboard. Hey! So, sideboard, pretty straightforward. We're running 2 Tormod's Crypt to deal with graveyard decks, 3 Essence Warden. Essence Warden gains us some life in aggro matchups, especially things like Burn. We don't want to fall too far behind on, so that helps. 2 guttural responses against control. I don't know whether this is worth it or not, but I put them in. I thought they could be useful, especially to stop a Cryptic Command, which keeps us from winning. Natural State, 3 of, stop enchantment, enchantment-based decks too, but enchantment and artifact-based decks, probably more artifact decks out there, but either of those 2. 2 Prey Upon, I don't know if I'm going to bring this in super often, just because I don't think our creatures are big enough to prey upon all that much, but it can help against certain combo decks that are creature-heavy. Not a bad card as a 2 of. And then Rapid Vigor is a pretty big one, pretty good for the deck. It's a mass regenerate for all of our creatures for 2 mana. If we know people are bringing in Supreme Verdict or any of those other creature wipes, bringing in Rapid Vigor is definitely worth it. There might be better options there, I don't know, but it's definitely a good one. And so yeah, that's the sideboard. I hope it'll work pretty well. I was a little shaky about how to build the sideboard for this deck. Most of the versions of elves that are out there are 2-color, and they rely heavily on the second color for their sideboard, especially the white versions. Like every sideboard card is white. That's kind of true in general, but especially true with the elf sideboard. There's just they hardly had any green in there, or even colorless. I think some of them had like Relic Progenitus, but anyway. So that's our sideboard, and then finally, this is the final slide that just says, hey, this is the deck as a whole. This is how much it costs. This is the list of all the mainboard cards. As you can see, mainboard cards are 40 creatures, 4 spells, and then 16 lands, which I don't bother having pictured here. Just slightly over $10 on Magic Online. The main board that I'm listing here is actually slightly less than that. The $10.23 includes the sideboard. I think it's like $9.80 or somewhere in there, $9.60 just for the main board. And then in paper, it would be about $60. As you can see, the Heritage Druids are way more expensive in paper, and they're kind of what jacked that price up. But the Ezuris and Imperious Perfects are a little bit expensive too. You might even be able to do something better than Imperious Perfect there in paper to keep the price down. Imperious Perfect is not the most important part of the decks for sure. Yeah, that's the deck. I'm going to go play some games with it. I'm actually super excited about this one. It seems really fun, and if we run into good matchups, we'll win. This is going to be a very matchup-dependent deck. If we run into bad matchups, we will lose. Like I said, Tron, blue-white control, anything with sweepers, any of those red decks that run Anger of the Gods, I don't think we have any chance in hell. But if we don't run into those matchups, if we dodge them, it could easily go 5-0. If we hit only those matchups, obviously it could easily go 5. But I think in most matchups it will do reasonably well. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon. Hey guys, Bobgar here. I just really wanted to quickly say, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you enjoy my content in general and would like to see more of it, subscribe. I'll be coming out with more content in the future. And please leave me comments and let me know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, both in terms of production and in terms of my play and my deck building and all that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys next time.